from Anita.
Thanks, Norman. Good morning. The Prime Minister is travelling to Brussels this morning after winning a vote of confidence in her leadership. Theresa May is hoping EU leaders will give her legally binding promises about the Irish backstop in her Brexit deal. Ahead of the formal summit itself, Mrs May will meet the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar and European Council President Donald Tusk for what he has called last-minute talks. Back home, leading Brexiteers say the Prime Minister should still resign, as a third of her MPs voted against her leadership. But Cabinet colleagues say the issue is now settled.
She's got the support of the party behind her, and I wish her every success today in making sure that she delivers on the questions some of my colleagues have had about the backstop. Thank you.
French police have released an image of the gunman suspected to have carried out the attack on a Christmas market in Strasbourg. Sharif Shakat is described as dangerous and not to be approached. The search for him has been extended to Germany. 2 people were killed in the attack on Tuesday night. Of soldiers are being deployed at Christmas markets across France in response to the incident. At least 9 people have been killed and more than 40 injured in a train crash in Turkey. The high-speed service collided with a locomotive used to carry out track inspections and came off the tracks at a station in the capital, Ankara. More than 40 people are thought to have been hurt. Canada's government says it's trying to locate a second Canadian citizen who's said to have been detained in China. Chinese state media reported that Michael Spavor was being investigated on suspicion of endangering national security. Beijing had threatened reprisals over the arrest of a senior executive at the telecoms firm Huawei. Ambulances in the UK have been vandalised more than 200 times in the past 3 years, according to a BBC investigation. Fireworks, knives and bricks have been used in attacks that have caused thousands of pounds worth of damage. One trade union says penalties for those responsible should be similar to those given to people who assault ambulance staff. New research claims that the calorie content of meals in UK restaurants is excessive and sit-down restaurants are unhealthier than fast food chains. Health experts say meals shouldn't exceed 600 calories. But researchers from the University of Liverpool, who analysed thousands of meals, found an average calorie count of 1,033 in restaurants and 751 in fast food chains. They said their findings were a cause for concern. The BBC has been criticised for failing to deliver value for money in its redevelopment of the set for EastEnders. The National Audit Office says the project at Elstree in Hertfordshire is likely to cost £27 million more than expected and finish 2.5 years late. The BBC says it has faced challenges beyond its control and was keeping the work under close scrutiny. And that's it from me. Back to Victoria at Westminster.
Absolutely freezing here, just to let you know, wherever you are in the UK. Hello, can you hear me? Is my microphone up? No? Yes? Hooray! We switched the microphone on. Yeah, I was just telling you how cold it was. Not that we expect any simple Westminster. We're here until 11. It's just after 10 o'clock. Andrew on Twitter says Mrs May won a larger majority last night than in the leadership contest of 2016. Rees-Mogg should resign. Diana on email says, I'm glad that Theresa May won the vote of no confidence. It's about time her party got behind her. She's doing a good job and doing the best for our country. Labour only want a general election and will never agree to any deal. It's a disgrace. Lynn says this. I'm feeling disillusioned this morning. What a mess we're in as a country. Parliament go off next week for their Christmas break with nothing resolved, and we're all left not knowing what's going to happen. We've had the vote, the people have spoken. Go back to Brussels, put your foot down this time, Mrs May. Tell them they won't get their billions if they don't meet what we want and voted for as a country. To some Conservative Party members who are also standing here freezing at Westminster. Benita Mesa-Palmer voted to remain. It seems like such a long time ago now. She definitely supports Theresa May. Phil Shepherd wants to leave the EU, even if that means leaving without a deal. Graham McMaster initially wanted to stay in the EU, now wants to leave, and Conservative Association Chairman of Cities of London and Westminster, Patrick Evershed. Hello, hello, hello. Let's cuddle together because it's so cold. Patrick, what is it like as a Conservative supporter looking on at your Conservative MPs tearing themselves apart again over Europe?
I'm absolutely furious with them because I think most rank and file Conservatives who knock on doorsteps are totally loyal to Theresa May, and we're absolutely completely fed up with the way members of Parliament are behaving.
So what's your message to them?
Well, I mean, they've done the damage, so, but they should, now that the vote is over, I think they should all rally solidly behind Theresa.
And vote for her Brexit deal with or without extra concessions?
No, well, the Brexit deal is fairly appalling. I mean, I think everyone's unhappy about it, and she's unhappy about it, and hopefully she might be able to get things improved.
OK, let's talk to Benita. Hello.
Hi.
What's your message to Conservative MPs?
I think we've had a very challenging few days and we must put it behind us now. I think we really do need to get behind Theresa May. I agree with Patrick.
What does that mean in practical terms, Benita?
In practical terms, we need to focus on making sure the Brexit deal happens, is voted through, we get the best deal that we can, and I think it's really noble of Theresa May, given the crazy few hours that she's had, that she's in Brussels trying to ask for those concessions today, and I trust her to do the best for us.
So people, MPs, who absolutely hate that deal, who believe it is not the Brexit the people voted for, who believe it's so much of a compromise that we will end up being takers and having no say over those rules, you say just vote for it anyway?
I say when we've got a Brexit referendum result which is so split, we have to find something that is in the best majority interest, and it's very difficult to get anything that everyone's going to agree on, of course, but this to me seems a very, very good compromise, and if it's the best that she can get, and I hope that she might get some, tweaks delivered today and tomorrow, then on Monday when she makes the statement to Parliament, I trust that it will be her best effort.
What do you reckon?
What I reckon is that on the point that MPs have to unite behind Theresa May, I absolutely think they have to unite behind Theresa May because she's our only leader for at least the next year.
Okay. So that's already not happening. You will have heard since she won that vote, some Conservative MPs have said she still needs to resign.
Yes, there is an argument for that, but in practical terms, I don't think she will resign. So I think we need to get behind her, we need to see what she comes up with Brussels, and then if necessary vote down the deal and hopefully leave with no deal. But that's a question for another time. I think for now we need to support her trying to get some concessions from Brussels.
Why do you want to leave with no deal?
Ideally, I wouldn't want to leave with no deal. I would want to leave with a type of super Canada arrangement like David Davis and Dominic Raab were suggesting the other day. But I think if it's absolutely necessary, we need to leave with no deal, because the four promises that people voted upon, and this is promised for both the Leave and Remain campaigns, were to leave the Single Market Customs Union, European Court of Justice jurisdiction, and ending free movement. And I'm afraid this deal doesn't deliver on all those promises.
It had to be a compromise, though. I mean, you're not going to get every single thing you wanted, are you?
We're not going to get every single thing we wanted with the deal, but the EU promised us last year that they would be open to a super Canada arrangement. So if we agreed with the EU back then, rather than kept on pushing things related to the customs union, then I think we would have got more of a deal that was in the national interest.
Do you feel that Theresa May's authority is draining from her as we speak?
Look, Victoria, we had a vote last night, and Ian Duncan Smith has famously said the family, the last election, Ian Duncan Smith said the family is damaged, but we have to come together, and it's exactly the same here. And I can only speak for myself, but I think that we need to unite again for Theresa May against opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, the Liberal Democrats and all the other parties, because that is the ultimate revenge of the Parliament to go against our party.
So it's a heartfelt plea for your MPs to unite. You know you're living in Fantasyland when you appeal for that.
No, I don't think it is Fantasyland, because I think some of our MPs are obviously going to go against our Prime Minister and won't vote with her, but I feel like enough MPs could back this deal, could back a new version of this deal, and could get this through Parliament, and really I pray that happens.
Right.
You've now heard from four members of the Conservative Party, picked absolutely at random, and all four of us think it's time that the Conservative MPs behave themselves better and united behind Theresa May. And I just hope they do listen to us. I think all of us are fed up with 117 people who voted against her.
And look, the Conservative Party's always been a broad church. We always are a family that maybe don't all agree on everything, as we've had in our chats earlier today, but this is the time to unite. I think Theresa May, in both her speeches yesterday, made it clear that we must, as a party, come together in the national interest. I think that she will actually come out and go out to other opposition people too, because clearly the parliamentary arithmetic proves that we need other people's backing.
To reach out to Labour, you mean?
To all MPs, okay. Because this must be in the national interest. I genuinely believe her.
Would you back her as Conservative members to doing that?
Yeah, I would genuinely back her, because I think we need a deal that's in the national interest. I supported the plotters yesterday, but now that they've lost, I think we should unite behind her, because there is a greater threat, and the greater threat is a Corbyn government over anything related to Brexit. So we need to stay united in order to defeat Corbyn, even if Theresa May is not the ideal leader.
Right. Would you back some quite major changes if she was able to get this through to her deal, which meant Labour MPs could come on board and vote for it and get it over the line? Would you back that as a Conservative member?
Yes, I think the idea of a customs union is out of the books, because remaining in a customs union, you know, creating a new customs union as Jeremy Corbyn wants, is not. But I think changes that could entrench workers' rights further, even if it is in writing, I think is a reassurance and is a change. And I think the EU are being tough at the moment, but they have admiration for Theresa May, and you can see that through all strengths. And in Salzburg, they treated her awfully, and I think they've learned definitely from their lessons. We have to make sure Labour MPs, Conservative MPs back this deal and get it through Parliament.
And Patrick, if Conservative MPs don't unite behind Mrs May, and we know that some won't, I mean they just won't, we've heard them on the airwaves in the last 12 hours, who is the person that could bring the two sides, the two halves of the Conservative Party back together again, or is that just impossible?
Well, it might be very difficult, but I think it'd be very unwise for me to say who I'd like to take over from her. I just give her all my support, and I don't think it helps anybody for me to say who I'd like to replace her.
Fair enough. But do you fear the party splitting?
Well, the party clearly is a very split.
No, I mean breaking in two.
No, I don't think it'll break in two, but I mean it's clearly split. And I mean all four of us want, as the rank and file people say, we want to see them unite. I've been to Conservative parties every evening this week, and everybody's furious at the way the Conservative members of Parliament are behaving.
Thank you all, and thank you for standing in the cold with us. Really appreciate it. And it's not too early to say Happy Christmas, is it?
No.
Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas. Thank you very much. OK, I think we're going to bring you a report from Hastings now. Our reporter John Owen was there last night, just as the vote was announced, the results of the vote was announced. It's a marginal constituency. Amber Rudd, the Work and Pension Secretary, is the Conservative MP for that area. She's got a majority of just over 340, something like that. And we're going to bring you some reaction from last night and also this morning.
Theresa May did win the confidence of her party, the backing of her party, but with many of her colleagues choosing to vote against her. So we are joined by some local residents and voters, most of whom are Conservative Party supporters. So let's get some reaction, starting just to my right. What do you make of last night's vote? Do you think Theresa May is now in a stronger position than she was?
I think so, yes, definitely. I think the Europeans are always wanting to have, they want to know where they are, and we know where they are, because May has said she's going to resign. She's got the support of her Conservative Party. The Labour leader hasn't asked for a vote of no confidence, which would worry them. If they don't give her some concessions at the next meeting of the Parliament, maybe Jeremy Corbyn will come up with a vote of no confidence. So that is what really frightens the Europeans more than anything else. They need somebody like May in power at the moment so that they can negotiate their position.
Okay, so Theresa May's position potentially strengthened in Brussels then. That's interesting. Let's move along down the line. And so do you think she's here to stay now for at least the foreseeable future?
Yeah, well now she's obviously got the vote to stay as such. I believe now it's time just to kind of get on with it now, and you know, maybe now that she's, as she did say, that her party, she's listened to the criticism, and hopefully that'll probably make her a bit of a stronger person now. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are voting against Theresa May last night. Do you think that means there's a lot of frustration with her potentially inside the Conservative Party?
There probably was a great deal of frustration. But to be truthful, after that vote, I think that a lot of people will actually be more confident with her at the moment. And as the other gentleman said, I do believe that the EU will give us a little bit more from that vote.
Okay. And Billy, I mean, you're just 16. What do you make of everything that's going on? What do you make of it all?
I think she's doing well, to be honest, with all the stress she's been put through something so big, and now everyone's trying to get her out, but she's going through it really well, to be honest.
Okay, so sort of provisionally supportive of Theresa May. You think she's doing well, even though she's been given a tough time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. And hello, so I think you work at the estate agent just down the road, is it?
On the corner, yes.
Yeah, is that right? And what's your reaction to the vote yesterday? You're a Conservative Party voter.
Yes.
Do you think that this has solidified Theresa May's position, or perhaps weakened her, because quite a lot of colleagues did vote against her?
I think that it's given her a sound basis now so that she can move forward with her plans, because it was like a bit of a distraction for her when she clearly just wants to get on with the job in hand of getting us the best deal moving out of Europe, and now she can on a sound basis move forward and work hard as she has been doing recently, and move forward and get a positive result for us.
Okay, so after last night's vote, it looks like there is qualified support here amongst these voters in Hastings.
John Owen reporting. Vic emails to say, Conservative MP Sarah Wollaston is talking complete sense this morning on your programme and described logically how things are and how they should progress. It doesn't have to end in chaos. Michael says, I live in Northern Ireland and myself and my family voted to remain for financial reasons. After seeing the intransigence and dictatorial position of the EU and in particular, we would vote leave in a second referendum. Even if it meant no deal. Jay on email says, I voted to leave the EU. If this is the best Theresa May can do, I would rather stay in the EU. Robert says, I voted remain. If there was another vote, I would vote leave. What this shows is we have no sovereignty over our country, and the House of Commons, both the government and opposition, are a joke. So many messages this morning. I will read some more in a moment after we've spoken to the Conservative MP Philip Davis, who voted against the Prime Minister last night. Do you accept the result?
Yes, absolutely. The Prime Minister won fair and square, and she's entitled to our support as leader after that ballot last night.
Which means you're going to vote for her Brexit deal whenever it comes?
No, there's two different things. I mean, I will vote to stick to the promises I made to my voters at the general election, and the promises that the Prime Minister made to voters at the general election, that we'll leave the customs union, we'll leave the single market, and so I won't vote for her deal as it is currently formed. But I accept that she should remain as leader of the Conservative Party.
What if she gets some concessions on the Northern Irish backstop, the controversial measure that may or may not come into play if we haven't got a free trade deal and if the transition period isn't extended?
Well, there's two things. The backstop has to be time limited or not exist at all. I mean, I don't really see any need for it at all, but it has to be, and it also has to be in the legally binding treaty. It's got to be part of the legally binding treaty.
You know that's not possible. So
well, it has to be. If it's not, it has to be legally binding. It can't not be legally binding. Right. The second thing is the money. We're handing over £39 billion for absolutely nothing in return, not even the guarantee of a free trade deal. When I would much prefer that money to be spent on schools and the police and other cash-strapped parts of our public services. So they're the two big things in the deal that are currently unacceptable to me.
Right. You are making it so hard for her that she might be forced to align with Labour and agree, for example, to stay in a customs union in order to get her deal over the line.
No, she needs to keep her promises that she made to the public at the general election. We made our promises to the people, and we've got to keep those promises to the people, and that means not being in the customs union, not being in the single market, taking back control of our money, our laws, our borders and our trade policy.
On the subject of a time limit, reported in the Times today that EU leaders might be prepared to offer that on the backstop to help get her deal passed. words along the lines of this would only be in place for a short period and only as long as strictly necessary while trade talks continued. Yes, it would be non-binding, but why would that not be enough for you?
Because it's got to be legally binding. Once we've signed this is a legally binding international treaty, and once we've signed up to it, that's it, and they could keep us trapped in it forever. And that the whole point of the referendum was taking back control. This would be giving up control of our future policy on customs and trade to the EU. That is completely unacceptable.
How long do you think she's got as Prime Minister?
Well, she said last night that she wouldn't fight the next election as leader of the Conservative Party.
When do you think that might be?
Well, I suspect the next election will be in 2022, and so I suspect she will stand down at some point before 2022. But I mean, who can predict what's going to happen in politics these days?
No, absolutely nobody. Who would you like to succeed her?
Well, maybe 4 years hence. So, you know, I don't want to get into that at this point. So.
Well, the jockeying position is going on now. I mean, the race to succeed her has begun.
Well, I don't know who the candidates may or may not be in 3 years' time, so I'll decide who I will support when the time comes.
OK. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Philip Davis, Conservative MP, did not support the Prime Minister in that confidence vote last night, but accepts the outcome, although it's going to make no difference to whether he votes for that Brexit withdrawal deal unless there's some major changes. In a moment, we'll get some information from Labour about what their strategy is with Labour MP Chi Unwara, who is Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy, and Newcastle MP. Hello to you.
Hi,
thank you for talking to us.
Yes.
When are you going to launch a no confidence motion in the government?
You know, we want to hold the government accountable. This is total shambles.
When are you going to launch that then?
So we need to make sure it has a maximum impact. We're not about gesture politics. So we need to make sure that we have a reasonable chance of success. So we've seen that the vote yesterday made absolutely no difference either to the working lives of people in my constituency or to the Brexit negotiations. It's just been a distraction from the reality of trying to get a deal that works for people. So as the opposition, we are going to respond to the situation that's ongoing and make sure that if and when we launch a vote of no confidence, it has a maximum impact. Has a chance of being successful, because
if and when. So it's not a guarantee then.
I think right now there's nothing that's guaranteed in politics right now, but it's certainly our intention to hold the government to account, and particularly to hold Theresa May to account. But just being away from a vote that she couldn't win, it's not up to us to give her a vote that she can't lose. We need to make sure that the vote of no confidence has the maximum impact and makes a real difference in the negotiations. It's not about a gesture. That's really important.
What do you say to your members, some of whom actually want you to launch that no confidence vote, lose it, because then that gets that out of the way and you can pivot, as the terminology goes. You can then go full steam ahead for backing a second referendum.
It's really important. Our motion, you know, we have 600,000 members. You know, our motion at conference was really clear. It was a plan. We have had a plan that actually we are sticking to, which is that we want a general election because that is what will make a real change to people's lives. And so we need to make sure we go about that in a way that has a chance of success. If we can't get a general election, if there's still the prospect of a no deal, then absolutely, you know, nothing is off the table, and I think that there's a strong argument for a people's vote at that point. But we want a general election first and foremost.
And right now, would you be what's the word? Let me think of the word. Sorry, been awake for hours. Would you be amenable? Amenable, that's the word. If Mrs May made some concessions towards opposition parties in order to get your votes for her deal?
This government is a wreck. It's a car wreck. It's a shambles. She cannot come back with a deal that works because her own backbenchers. It's not about us. It's actually her own backbenchers won't tolerate a deal that has a permanent customs union, and that is the only thing which will avoid a hard border in Ireland and also give us a business, our integration, our economy, make it work. So she actually can't get a deal which meets her own fractured and divided party. And if she gets a deal which meets our 6 tests, we have always said that that's what we will be going for. But she can't do that because her party is such a car crash of division that they can't agree on something which is workable. Whereas we have said we want a permanent customs union and we want to maintain workers' rights, environmental protections, so we're not competing with the European Union as some kind of low wage, low protection economy.
What if whatever she comes back with, whenever the vote is, it's voted down, and the country is then on the path towards some kind of no deal, so no transition period?
No deal would be absolutely catastrophic for
but
our
if you vote
economy.
it down, then you're heading for that.
But that's accepting the idea that it's either her deal with all its failures, which doesn't keep the economy in my region across the country, doesn't work for that economy. It's either her deal or no deal. No, we have a parliament. Parliamentary sovereignty is what part of the Brexit vote was about. And Parliament needs to have a meaningful vote. It needs to have a meaningful vote, which means being able to change the deal.
Right. Okay.
That's what a meaningful vote is.
Yeah. But you know.
Sorry, but she shouldn't be kicking the can down the road and putting that off. That's the basic requirement that the country needs.
Okay. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chi Onwara, who is the Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy. Theresa May is on her way to Brussels, where European leaders are gathering for the European Council Summit. She'll meet the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, which will be a key meeting as she's hoping to get some legally binding promises on the Irish backstop. Let's get more from our reporter in Brussels, Adam Fleming. OK, what chance of her getting anything, Adam?
Oh, a really good chance, and we know that because the document that the 27 other EU leaders will consider tonight and sign up to at the end of the summit is floating around Brussels in draft form, and we've seen it. It's 1 and a bit pages long, it's 6 paragraphs, and it's still in draft form, and you can tell that because it's got little square brackets around lots of it, which is the technical way that the diplomats basically say this is all still to be agreed. And it boils down to there's 3 key things in it. I'll run through them pretty quickly. The first thing that you see in the document is it says the withdrawal agreement is non-negotiable. The text of the divorce treaty, which contains the infamous backstop, is not going to change. But then it looks like EU leaders are going to make a pledge to continue using their best endeavours, a legal word for trying really, really hard, to complete a trade deal that means the backstop can be swept away even if the backstop has come into force. So you'd have Brexit Day, then the transition period where there'd be negotiations for a trade deal. If those negotiations didn't work, you then go into the backstop, but the negotiations would continue with the idea of being the backstop could be pulled out and replaced by the future relationship. Now that is making explicit something that was only implied in the Brexit documents so far. So I think the UK will see that as a win. And the third important thing is that the EU is saying, right, let's spend the next couple of weeks working on what other language, what other documents we can come up with that could provide even more reassurance that we mean what we say when we say the backstop is temporary and not the intended destination. That's how they're trying to reassure MPs where you are.
Right, OK, but we've spoken to some this morning. Unless it's legally binding, some have already told us they will not be reassured.
So this document, if EU leaders sign up to it tonight, will be politically binding because all 27 of them will have sat round a table, we will have seen them, they will publish this document, it will be in black and white. So it will be politically binding, which means it is a statement of intent. I think what they will then spend the next couple of weeks doing is looking at all the options they've got to deliver something that is legally binding, because that is what Theresa May has said she wants to get. So we'll get the political bit tonight and we'll get potentially a more legally bit in January next year. The problem is, though, the EU is not prepared to write anything that's legal that contradicts the withdrawal agreements, because they say that is the prime legal text. I know it all sounds a bit complicated and a bit tricksy, but it will come down to 2 things. How far can they go to convince MPs, and are the MPs convinced?
Adam, thank you very much. Adam Fleming in Brussels. Let's speak to Conservative supporters who have used their money to either back the Prime Minister or to try to stop her EU withdrawal deal. Let's talk to Charlie Mullins, who runs a plumbing business and wanted Theresa May to go, and Rami Ranger, chairman of an export firm and a big financial backer of Theresa May. How big in terms of financial backing? How much have you donated?
By supporting the Conservative Party, it's cheaper in the long run. because the other lot will cost me a lot more in high taxes, high employment.
But how much have you put into the party in the last few years?
Well, I probably put about £1 million, but that is a chicken feed if you compare the consequences of the Labour government to the economy and to my business.
And what about yourself in terms of wanting to remain, Charlie Mullins? How much have you put into that?
Probably about 100,000.
100,000?
100,000 well spent, you know. Undoubtedly she needs to step down. The confidence is not there no more. We need a people's vote. Undoubtedly she's not good enough to lead the party, and therefore she can't be good enough to do Brexit.
Right. I mean, you say it's money well spent. We're nowhere near a second referendum, are we?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, she's 42 votes away from losing her job, so, you know, I think we're very close.
Except she stay for a year.
Well, I don't think she's going to stay, let's be fair. She'll jump ship once we Brexit, if we Brexit. But, you know, I think we've got to put it to the people. People have got to be allowed to vote. The best deal we've got is the deal we've already got. I mean, you know, all we need to do is withdraw Article 50 and stick to the deal we've got. She can't get a better deal than what she's got. She had 2.5 years to get it, and look where we are.
And what do you say to the most millions of people who voted to leave 2 years ago?
What do I say to them?
Yeah.
I say let's do a people's vote. Circumstances have now changed, and I say if she's not good enough to be the party leader, how can she be good enough to take on our biggest change that we're making in 50 years? You know, she's got no respect. She's got no power at all now, and actually, you know.
Very much so. I think she has worked incredibly hard. Well, all these guys who were united for a wrong cause to undermine their own leader do not realize the repercussion of their action. They will face it at the next general election. No party wins if party is disunited. I mean, these guys, lackluster guys, they have undermined the authority of Prime Minister, and then they ask her to negotiate on their behalf. How can you send a weak Prime Minister to get a deal which is good for everybody? And most importantly, in democracy, Prime Minister has to care for the aspiration of those 48% who voted to remain. And we are no longer have an empire. We have to do deals. We have to cooperate with the countries in order for our economy to survive. We just can't be dictating our terms to the rest of the European community.
Look, me and Rami are drinking from different teapots on this one. I respect what he says. He's a great businessman, but we've got a leader that can't lead, Rami.
No, leaders are... if you remember a movie called El Cid, there was a dead general, they put it on the horseback and they won battle. So we have a leader who's live and kicking, working very hard, and we want to kill her. I don't understand. Where is the other leader? Who has the guts to be Prime Minister of this country? There is nobody. These guys are just ganging up on a lady who's working very hard for this country and trying to unite the country and give us a deal which is good for the economy, good for Britain, and the economy, we will attract investment from countries like Japan, because we have access to European market.
Rami, that's what we're lacking at the moment. Investment has stopped. People have lost confidence in her. She's already said herself she's not good enough to lead us into the next election. Why should she be good enough to deal with Brexit?
We have a Prime Minister now, and we have to rally...
A weak Prime Minister.
No, we made her weak. Leaders are empowered. These guys, lackluster guys who do not understand the consequences of their action at the next election, they are marginal MPs with a marginal seat. They're going to definitely lose because of the action of these people.
Well, we're going to lose because we've got a leader that can't lead.
No, it's nothing to do with leader.
May I read some comments from voters around the country? Stevie on text says Brexit is a shambles. Now that we know we will be personally worse off when we leave, let us have a second referendum to see what the people now think. This texter says, hard Brexit or riots. This texter says, Theresa May is doing a brilliant job. It's time people accepted the referendum result and stopped sowing the seeds of economic crisis. Caroline on text says, no taxation without representation. If you run a second referendum without a no-deal option, you fail to represent a large proportion of the country. Not everyone cares about the economy at the expense of democracy. I would rather my children grew up in tough times with fewer material possessions and better understanding the value of money, but the democratic right to choose and change the person at the top never an option in the current EU institutions. How do you respond to that? It's not all about the money.
Well, of course it's not all about the money, but we're also thinking, everybody's thinking of the future, but there won't be no future the way it's going on. You know, we need...
But this woman, Caroline, she says she's weighed up the risks, and she actually wants to go for something that gives us democracy,
she's probably not on the
even if it meant being her kids being poorer.
But that's easy to say, but she's probably not on the poverty line, so there's millions of people out there on poverty that don't want that. So it's all very well saying if you've got a few quid that, you know, we'll be worse off.
We don't know if she has.
Well, let's be fair, nobody that didn't have no money that doesn't want to be worse off, they want to be better off.
Well, I'm very sorry, but we do not realise the consequences of hard Brexit. And if you have a second referendum, I can guarantee you we will have overwhelmingly yes vote. People have
really?
Let's
call it on then. Let's call it on.
It's not democracy, because we already had a referendum and we have to deliver on that referendum, and the Prime Minister is doing a very difficult job to please everybody. You're not going to please everybody, Charlie.
No, of course. But Rami, you know, you say that she's had 2 votes, hasn't she? We voted her in for the election. Now we'll give her a second chance. So why can't we?
He has already brought a deal on the table which delivered on the Brexit. You know, you have no understanding. The violence will return to Northern Ireland, and you may encourage Scotland to go for independence. We may destroy the union of this country if we're not careful.
When you say we, Theresa May?
No, the people who are just focused on Brexit, they don't realise that the country has to remain united. We have to take into consideration the aspiration of 48%. What kind of democracy is this? You ignore half of your family.
42 votes away from losing her job, and here we are backing her to lead us.
A win is a win is a win.
Sorry?
A win is a win is a win.
Well, you say
her supporters. Lynn on email.
It's very uncomfortable for her.
Victoria,
She's got a
do you think
by
changing Prime Minister will change the circumstances?
Of course not. Of course
exactly.
It won't change it. It won't change it.
It's not going to. And the Brexit is not making of our Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is trying to resolve the situation, a worse situation.
2.5 years.
No, because she has to deal with 27 opponents.
I get that.
They all have to fight for their own corner.
Tell me this,
and one lady fighting for Britain.
I'll ask you one question. Will her deal get through Parliament?
That is beside the point.
Really?
But at least we should have given her a chance. We should support her. We should empower her so she can go as a strong leader and fight our corner.
Okay,
no deal, no May, no Brexit.
Okay, more messages, and then we may need to talk to you further because we don't know where our next guests are. So I hope you've got something left to say. Lynn on email says, I almost wish for a general election. Just so Jeremy Corbyn is forced off the fence and they get real. Half his party just want to get rid of this government, the other half just want to get rid of him. No wonder they're too scared to table a vote of no confidence in the government. Sebastian says, how ironic that the hardcore Brexiteers demanded another vote on May's leadership despite there having been one 2 years ago. Surely following their logic another Brexit referendum would be totally legitimate. Nigel texts this, I've never been a fan of Theresa May and stopped voting for the Tory party because of her when she was Home Secretary. But her party needs to get behind her and get the Brexit job done. The thought of Labour having power and having anything to do with the Brexit process is terrifying. And David says this, Theresa May should resign now. She has no mandate to remain as Tory party leader. She's just wasting taxpayers' money travelling back and forward to Brussels. Get back to the meaningful vote. If she thinks she can court the Labour Party, then she is deluded. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas. Thanks for coming on
Merry
the programme.
Christmas.
Thank you. So while we wait for our next guest, let's take a look at how the country got here. Have a look at this.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the parliamentary party does have confidence.
It is 18 minutes to 8 and we have heard literally in the last few minutes that the magic number 48 has been reached.
There will be the first phase in a leadership challenge against the Prime Minister tonight.
I will contest that vote with everything I've got. A change of leadership in the Conservative Party now will put our country's future at risk and create uncertainty when we can least afford it.
The Prime Minister sweeping down to Parliament for St Days
her career. She has 9 hours from now to persuade her colleagues that she is the person to lead the country and has earned the right to keep her job.
Mr. Speaker, today I will have meetings, possibly many meetings, with ministerial colleagues and others.
Whatever happens with her Conservative leadership vote today, it is utterly irrelevant to the lives of people across our country.
I've reached the conclusion that because the Prime Minister is unwilling to move away from a deal which I don't think delivers Brexit and I cannot support, that I felt it was time for a new leader.
When we leave here in the evenings, we're stepping over sleeping bodies in Westminster Tube Station. There are so many pressing issues to tackle, and yet all of our energy is being sucked up, not just with Brexit, but now with an internal row which does nothing to improve the lives of people in our country.
I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues in tonight's ballot. Whilst I'm grateful for that support, a significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said. Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country.
Well, the Conservative Party has challenged its leaders in the past from within, as you know. Let's talk to some people who've witnessed previous tumultuous times and see what their reaction is to where Mrs May finds herself today. Baroness Altman, who wants the UK to remain in the EU, is here. Former Cabinet Minister under Sir John Major. David Miller, who supports Brexit. Sorry?
David Cameron.
Oh, I was talking about David Miller, sorry. Sorry, I've moved on from introducing you. I'm so sorry, Ros Altman, sorry. And MP Michael Fabricant, who has tweeted this morning that the Tories must now unify and avoid the self-destructiveness of the Major years. And just remind some of our audience who are young how destructive that period was.
Terrible. But this is worse.
Why?
Because I think there was never the overt dislike between two large groups in the Conservative Party. You know, this morning we had the privilege of hearing an ex-Conservative leader saying he'd voted against the current leader, even though the current leader had survived. I think the fact they cannot contain their detestation for each other is fundamental blow to what was always said, you know, loyalty was the Conservative Party's secret weapon. Well, it's a very secret weapon now, isn't it?
How do you react to the Chancellor describing some of his colleagues as extremists?
Well, I mean, proves my point. I mean, I actually think that, I mean, you know, the Prime Minister we have to blame for this, of course, is not Theresa May, but David Cameron, letting loose, unleashing these demons. And Europe has always been very destructive for the Conservative Party. But John Major had, I'm not sure whether it's a word we should use, but it began with B. He was describing one or two of his colleagues. But, you know, it wasn't the overt hatred, almost.
Are there some Bs in the current Conservative Party?
I'm sure there are. Probably a lot of Bs. Enough Bs to fill a decent-sized hive, I would say.
Would you be described as one of those, Michael Fabricant?
Oh, I don't think so. I'm a nice guy.
Nice guy, he is.
I'm going to disagree with you, though, because a little bit of argument is always good on a television programme. As bad as the John Major era, actually. I was there as well, and the rows I saw...
We're both getting old gracefully together.
Afraid so. And the rows I saw breaking out, you know, in the tea room and all the rest of it, you don't get that now. And sure, people have got very strong...
But now you have people in front of the cameras, the Chancellor, calling some colleagues, potentially even yourself,
and that,
extremists.
I know, and that was raised, actually, at the meeting, the secret meeting, so I shouldn't be revealing it, but it was raised at with the Prime Minister, and the Chancellor was there who looked at his shoes. But you know, Philip Hammond's a lovely guy, but he does occasionally sort of put foot in mouth when it comes to certain use of language. But there isn't the loathing between individuals that I think existed in the Major years. And you know, a lot of that all had stemmed from the defenestration...
But we knows better than you do.
Defenestration of Margaret Thatcher, and I don't think that exists at the moment, and shouldn't.
What's your view?
Well, I think this is actually all about one issue, and it's all about
what is our relationship with Europe?
That's
Where
right.
does Britain stand in our relationship with Europe?
And no Conservative Party leader has been able to satisfactorily answer that question over decades in order to bring the party together.
And that's where we are now. I think what David Cameron was trying to do was get rid of the animosities and the fundamental differences on
he
Europe.
was trying to see off UKIP,
move
if you're
on,
being honest.
and then we could bring the
In the
party
most
back
foolish
together.
possible way.
But unfortunately, because of what happened with UKIP and then what happened with the referendum, we are now being torn apart by the same forces that have been splitting the party for a long time. And at the same time, of course, the Labour Party is also split.
Absolutely.
So we have a country that is divided from its political class right down to other elements of the population, and we, I think, need to bring the country back together, respect each other's views, value our place in the world, and actually find a way forward.
There'll be plenty of people who agree with that, but who is the person to do that?
We don't have any obvious leader. You know, a lot of the country have a huge sympathy for Theresa May.
Yes.
I mean, you can't argue against how she has been trying her absolute utmost, day and night, to find a way forward, to try and please those who really don't
And that's
want to be
why
in
I
Europe.
think there were just 100 votes.
Just
there
100.
isn't.
Oh, come off it.
There
Just.
isn't an well, you know, 200 people voted. Well, you know, I totally agree with Roz. And we've got to keep this party together. And one of the ways I'm keeping this party together is not telling anybody how I voted, actually, because because if I say how I voted, I'm going to make not enemies, but I'm going to make some of my colleagues angry. And you know, I'm an emollient sort of guy, so they can guess, but I'm not going to say.
The problem for the Conservative Party is that David Cameron unleashed these demons, which have always been difficult to control in the Conservative Party. And what's now become impossible is that there is no happy issue out of these negotiations that is possible. And that's why I think sensible people will say, look, we had a go at this Brexit. A false prospectus was given to the public. I listened with patience to you.
You interrupted me several times.
Brexit, the agenda put in by those advocating Brexit was somehow, you know, we could just send them a text saying we're off and stronger letter follows, and that would all be all right.
I don't think people thought it was quite as simple as that.
But the reality is, it's now proving to be impossible, and instead of Brexit, all that's likely to be on offer in any renegotiation is Breno, Brexit in name only.
No, I don't agree with that.
And that is why, I didn't expect you would, but that is why, if we're talking about, you know, the motherhood and apple pie stuff of bringing the country back together, the best way to do that is probably to accept that this is not going to work, and the divisions it is causing are not worth the effort.
And
find some way of reconciling ourselves with the EU.
What divisions would there be if that was the approach?
Look, we're in the sort of situation where there's no happy issue out of these afflictions.
Okay.
But nobody is going to find, they're not going to cave in, because they know Theresa May, having failed to win an election, she has no clout.
But
and they also
know
that there is no majority for a no.
The Tories need to remember the national interest. This isn't just about the Tory party. We need to come together. We need to find a way forward that can command a majority in the House of Commons for the sake of our country.
And at the end of the day, it'll be compromise. It won't be David. It won't be those who want to have a completely clean Brexit. It'll be compromise. But we've already seen last night that the European Union is beginning to move. And that's the way they always do it. They leave things for the last minute. They're sclerotic. And that's why I voted leave.
And I would like to ask British people again.
Thank you, all of you. Thanks very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
Thank you. Martin on text says, I was a Brexiteer, but now I see that we were conned. Time for a people's vote on this. This time with full enfranchisement, votes for expats, I beg your pardon, EU citizens in the UK, and 16 to 18-year-olds under international supervision, a true people's vote. June says this: it's a disaster for this country that Theresa May is still our Prime Minister, whose heart, as far as the country is concerned, is in the wrong place. She's refused to use her head, wasting 2.5 years but compromising. The only people she listens to are herself and some unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats in the EU. It was obvious after the first disastrous compromise that we must work for coming out on WTO rules, that's World Trade Organization rules, and then negotiate some kind of trade deal. Frank says this: in 2016 we voted to leave the EU in a snap election. Theresa May tried to strengthen her negotiating position and it was the public who decided to weaken her. We're now paying the price of our actions. We need to compromise and support the best deal we can get and get out. Europe has a short memory and is treating us with contempt. Why do we want to stay in? This has strengthened the leave argument. And one more for now. This is from Roz. I'm really fed up of listening to MPs trying to say that Leavers have changed their minds over Brexit. Immigration is still top of the list for Leavers. As long as freedom of movement is stopped, we can live with the other problems we may have. We will get through it eventually, as we have always done. Let's talk now to Sam Coates. He is Deputy Political Editor at the Times newspaper. And Norman is here as well. Norman Smith, hello. Good to see you. OK, Sam Coates, how do you assess where Theresa May is now?
Well, this morning's got a sort of morning after the night before feel. I can't imagine that the Conservative headquarters Christmas party last night was that fun. Everybody's claiming this morning is that last night was a win. Everybody's saying that their opponents lost. So allies of Theresa May are saying, look, she won. She won pretty resoundingly. 200 people voted in her favour. Opponents within the Conservative Party are saying she lost more than a third of her party, which is equally true. And Labour are suggesting that she doesn't have the authority to govern, but are asking her to put forward the meaningful vote. Look, it could be said that we're not much further forward than we were on Monday, but it does seem to me like Theresa May is just a bit more weakened. We've got Dominic Raab coming out this morning making comments that very much suggest that he too thinks that Theresa May's time is up. The Prime Minister has a couple of cards left to play. She is, of course, in Brussels today, possibly tomorrow, looking for a bit more out of Europe. But I don't think that she's going to get anything like the minimum that would convince most of her own side and the DUP. So that's and then she could just bring forward the vote. I know of 5 people...
before Christmas?
To before Christmas. Now, I know both wings of her cabinet would like her to do that. The Remainers wanted to bring it forward to lose and then have a whole load of what are known as indicative votes to try and find what alternatives might work. Brexiteers wanted to come forward, bring it, make it, do the vote, lose, and then they can have what they regard as a proper renegotiation that tries to get rid of the backstop, something that Europe has said all along it won't do. Labour wanted to bring forward the vote before Christmas. Because they also want the opportunity to vote it down. Personally, I just want Christmas, but that doesn't seem to be one of the options on the table.
OK, Norman, how do you assess things then?
Well,
what's going to happen?
I think Sam's right that not much has changed, but I think one sort of significant maybe movement is that the number of Tory MPs who are prepared basically to block this deal is probably higher than we thought. I mean, 117, given that the Brexiteers were caught on the hop yesterday. They weren't ready. The leaders were at 6s and 7s. They didn't have a coherent message. Downing Street, on the other hand, was straight out the blocks, getting people out in front of the cameras. PM had a good session at PMQ. She got a bit of a bounce at the 22. So it was a dismal day for the Brexiteers, and yet they still got 117, despite Mrs May offering up this reassurance that she won't stand at the next election. That suggests to me that really we may be reaching maybe a tipping point in the Tory party in this sort of unending civil war over Europe, whether we are now heading for the kind of final clash.
The denouement?
Maybe, yeah.
What will it look like?
Who knows? There's sort of wild talk about whether the party can stay together. Not entirely fanciful, because it's not just a sort of ideological divide. It's now becoming a sort of very emotional, personal, psychological divide between these different camps. Bluntly, many of them heartily loathe each other, and it's hard to see how you bind that together. So it's not out of the question. The other thing that I think is interesting, there's a lot of loose talk about how maybe the way through this is trying somehow to get some broader cross-party consensus. In other words, if you can't get the Tories on board, then the only way Mrs May cracks that is to reach out. The trouble is, Mrs May has shown no aptitude, ability, or maybe even interest in reaching out beyond her own ranks. But looking at it in terms of the numbers, it isn't going to go through unless she can get people beyond the Tories on her side.
Right, so some kind of reaching out to Labour?
Well, that would be, you know, one strategy. I suspect her strategy will be to put her head down and just keep battering away at that wall, trying to wear people down with a dose of fear that unless they crack, we really, really, really are heading for no deal. And I think, you know, her whole political style is just to keep going and going and going and going, and, you know, to take defeat and then come back and have another defeat and just keep pummeling away in an attempt to break through.
Can you see the Conservative Party splitting into two over this?
I think there are the first signs that that's entirely possible. Norma's completely right about the loathing. A lot of business these days in politics is conducted in private on WhatsApp groups, and you see the forming tribes or piling into one another on these private messages that then continually leak. And what you see in those conversations behind the scenes is the visceral hatreds that are being entrenched on social media. It's a very new form of politics. It's having a destabilising effect. Previously you would have all talked it out. Now you and your tribe fight it out and form pretty hardcore, resilient groups. And I am now talking to Tory MPs who say, well, if, for instance, the Conservative Party wants a no-deal exit, and that's the policy for the next manifesto in an election, that they wouldn't stand on that. 20, 30, 40 MPs, they speculate, would be like them, refusing to stand on a no-deal Brexit. Others say if you just have Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg leading the party, Heidi Allen said yesterday, she wouldn't then take the whip. It does feel like the Conservative Party is more divided by Brexit than it can be united by other things. They've got Jeremy Corbyn on the other side of the fence. They all agree they don't like him, but one of the fascinating bits of Labour's tactics, they're dialing down the noise. A lot of people were a bit confused by Jeremy Corbyn in PMQs yesterday. He left it to question 6 out of 6 before raising the whole vote of no confidence. Maybe Prime Minister's questions, they said. No, there's a deliberate Labour tactic to shrink into the background and let the two wings of the Conservative Party slug it out, because they judge that's the best route to clear the way for them to clear the way for a path for them to walk through, possibly into Paris.
Okay, regarding Labour then, so you have just described that. There is some pressure on them from their own supporters to do something.
There's massive pressure. From grassroots, from MPs who basically asked Corbyn to do two things. One, to put down a vote of no confidence. Government's in disarray, go for it. There are talks with the DUP. Would they succeed? Probably not. When that happens, then to shift gear and move towards openly and explicitly campaigning for another referendum. And that, I think, is Mr. Corbyn's real problem. He does not want to get locked into this sort of one option of a second referendum, because he fears that would have in Leave supporting Labour constituencies. You know, there's a lot of people around Mr. Corbyn are terrified of the impact that would have in traditional core northern working class Labour constituencies, that the party would lose its grassroots. So they're desperately trying to hold it back. But when you look in sort of certainly at grassroots levels amongst the activists, I mean, just anecdotally, every other Labour person you come across seems to be saying, will Mr. Corbyn back a second referendum? He, very personally, and those around him, I think, to a second referendum and Labour campaigning for a second referendum.
He's the block.
He and those around him,
right,
yes.
Yeah. Would you agree?
I think that's very astute analysis. Everyone's looking at the Labour leadership to see if they could shift. It's far from clear that they will. But one of the most fascinating changes in British politics over the last 3 or 4 weeks has been a group inside the Conservative cabinet that just look like they're tiptoeing a bit closer to a second referendum. Not Theresa May yet, but David Gauke, David Liddington, Amber Rudd, Philip Hammond, Greg Clark. They just seem to, having previously been entertaining and playing footsie with a Norway plus option single market customs union, are now asking themselves, well, if that, why shouldn't we just stay in and have the votes and have the representation? And I just think that option